I hit it.
All right, we're good.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. I didn't know that, that's. Right.
Keep our audio on. I made sure I didn't link our YouTube. So wait.
Yeah, so it's like, well, you might have to call it by the way.
Is that right, Hank?
Yeah.
Yeah, we just give them.
Showing you what's on our camera. Not that, not just.
I'd like to talk to somebody. I would like to talk to somebody. This is emergency.
You stop.
I do not need to talk to anybody, and everybody has to turn it in because we don't want to stick. But just.
Go back to our.
So, start the foreman.
Go back to our Zoom.
Yeah, let's go back to the meeting. There you go. Don't stop the, don't stop the live stream. It says live stream.
So we're good?
As far as I know.
Okay.
If it's not working, we'll just have to press on.
I think that you
Okay.
Okay, I think we're starting.
Or ready to start. Ready to start. I don't have a gavel to ring but anyway, I get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Board of Select officially starting. We are still waiting for a member trying to join virtually. Janessa is hopefully will be able to join. Had a issue this morning. She couldn't travel from Pikeville to Frankfurt, so hopefully she can join us shortly. And Tiffany is our other member, and she has auditors at the hospital, and she said, if I don't come on, that means I'm tied up with the auditors. So that's our two other members here. We welcome Mr. Nickel back again. He's co-counsel and counsel
Of council.
Of
With
council.
my office.
with Mr. Bringelman. They can explain that to you, what that means at some other point offline. Okay? But we're glad to have that. And thank you, welcome to our visitors here today. First order of business is minutes.
Okay. Yeah, so the minutes have been sent out for August for review. Does anybody have any additions they'd like to add to the minutes for August?
Just need to check and spell Mr. Nichols' name correctly. Nickles. I had it, of course, I'm thinking Nichols and K-C-H. The other spelling. So we'll make that correction.
Okay. Then, motion to approve the minutes once that correction is made.
So move. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. It's approved. Mr. Kelly, operations report.
Okay, we got applications, LSW 0, CSW 58, LCSW 67. Renewals, LSW 7, CSW 58, LCSW 92. Temporary permits, clinical 7, clinical renewal 4,
Okay.
makes the total 11. We've had 63 contracts that were approved. 5 were deferred, and all of them were for the same reason. They all checked the third box, where the hours do not count towards your LCSW. And I caught it and emailed them and said, did you mean to check the third box because you can't count your hours? No. So, they would correct the first page.
Okay.
But just pay attention to when you're filling out your contract, make sure that, because we want your hours to count for your LCSW.
Right, and I'm sure they could email you if they had a question or what they wrote, call you,
Yes,
do that before. Okay.
yes,
What
absolutely.
is the purpose of that box?
The third box is that when you're below the hours, then you can't count according to the reg. If you're below the 20 hours or whatever, you can't count the supervision hours. You have to have a contract, but you can't count it. That's the one that we're talking about eliminating. Yeah, no, it doesn't.
It's confusing.
It's confusing.
It is, it's confusing. But it says in bold letters, these hours do not count towards your LCSW. So just be aware, but everybody said, well, you know, I'm clinical. So I checked clinical, so. So, I approved, two agencies to be providers, and both of those were for ethics. And I approved 3 sponsorships.
Total licensees.
Total licensees, 7,778.
Okay. All right. Good deal. Any questions? Motion for approval.
So moved.
Second. Motion second. For the operations report, questions? All approved? All right. Any opposed? Thank you. All right. Finance.
All right, so, our finance numbers are looking good. Our overall balance in our account is $717,116.24. Now, our allotment, as we recall, we got a huge increase in our allotment, so that was $832,000 for the fiscal year. So far, we have, $772,949.43 of unexpended. And our revenues for August were $48,959.12. And the expenditures for August were $26,812.90. Any questions anybody have about finances or money?
Good. Keeps. At ASWB and leadership meeting, some discussion with partnership. Maybe I said, well, our finances are public record. We're okay, and there was a board member who wanted to see if we could adopt them because we had more money. Because they don't have money. It was just the difference between how states operate and the difference between an independent board versus composite boards. And again, we're an independent board, and the finances really support what we do and really is a help.
Yeah,
So it's a plus. All right, anything else?
I don't think so.
Motion for today's per diem. So move.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Everybody opposed? Still don't have. The essence, so hopefully, all right, Mr. Cardi.
All right, so the first one we're presenting today is case number 2205, which involves a list of improper record keeping and billing, possibly notes and such. The case was forwarded to the investigator of the investigator's review and investigation. The committee recommends dismissal. There is insufficient evidence to support the initiating complaint. Case number 2205.
As you can tell by the number, this is a case that's been hanging out there for quite a while, getting the investigation, and it was inconclusive to support any claim for violation of law, so. Committee's recommending dismissal. Questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you.
All right, case number 244824-48, which involves possible fraud and misrepresentation. The committee reviewed the complaint and the response. The committee recommends further investigation of the initiating complaint by the contracted investigator and seeks the board's authorization of expenses.
Good. So this is authorization for to investigate. This is another case that looks like it will involve a student intern, maybe more. On the least one.
Yeah, so we do have sorts of practices. Of utilizing intern, possibly billing and such.
Is this complaint against the student or the supervising social worker or the owner of the?
The practicum student is the one who initiated the complaint.
Okay.
Based on the speculation put on by the practicum supervisor, who is a licensed social worker.
Right. But so the complaint is against the licensed social worker who's technically the supervisor.
Correct. Yep.
Any other questions, discussion? All in favor of the investigative referring for investigation? Aye.
All right, the next one is case number 2451-24-51. It involves some disagreement, dispute over treatment of a minor child. Okay, after reviewing the complaint and the response, the committee recommends dismissal. There is insufficient evidence to support the initiating complaint. Questions?
Okay, all in favor of dismissal?
Aye.
Next case is case number 2454-24-54, alleged client abandonment, patient abandonment. After reviewing the complaint and the response, the committee again recommends dismissal. There is insufficient evidence to support the initiating complaint of client abandonment. Questions?
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Next one we have is case number 2455-24-55. Alleged dual relationship and or boundary violations. After reviewing the complaint and the response, the committee recommends dismissal. There is insufficient evidence to support the initiating complaint. We did not establish or notice any violations. Boundary violations or dual relationship. So it was not a professional relationship.
Questions? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
We're not doing that. Nope, that's the last one. And just an FYI, if you're expecting to hear about your complaint that you're involved or a complaint you may have filed and you didn't hear that being presented today, that means the committee is continue to review and may be waiting for additional information before we can make our findings and present it to the board.
Thank you. There's one final comment. There's a couple of cases that we dealt with this time where the response did not meet the 20-day requirement that's in the reg. We have not, we're trying to move cases through as quickly as possible, but when responses are delayed and staff have to continue to ask for the response, that delays the case as well. The regulation does read that failure to respond is a violation in itself. So if it becomes a pattern or something, the board may have to decide how to enforce that case in order to make cases not linger out there for that.
And that's why it becomes extremely important for licensee to update the board with an email address, phone numbers, or mailing address that you may have in file if it changes. So you're receiving notification in a timely manner. And we've noticed sometimes if the address we have is not the address you use anymore or the email address.
Which is the responsibility of the licensee to
Correct.
notify us within 10 days technically, when they make changes. But they go to the self-service and don't do that. Okay, application committee.
Yeah, so our committee of two reviewed applicant number one. In the application, to Quest testing, the applicant had outlined, some addiction challenges that led to behaviors that ensued that resulted in a felony. The applicant has taken better steps in education and was eligible, for early release and parole, and has completed everything that they needed to complete. We are waiting on an official transcript from this applicant, but we're okay for them to test once that's received.
Questions?
So you have documentation that they complete all their legal steps.
Yes. Mhm.
All in favor, testing? Approved?
Aye.
Hi.
There she is. Tiffany.
Sorry.
That's okay. You had auditors or something that would take precedence. That's a challenge. Okay. All right.
All right, our second applicant was approved to take the LCSW exam in 2018 and 2020, so twice before. And they are applying to take the exam again now, in 2024. However, here at the board, we can't locate her supervision record. So we contacted her LCSW supervisor to make sure that she in fact did do supervision. And we are going to approve her application to take the exam. She obviously had to have this turned in 2 times before. And the LCSW supervisor does remember this person having had supervision. So I think we feel confident in saying that it's okay for her to test.
They need the supervisor's record of supervision.
The person that we talked to, she said she supervised her a while back. So this was like prior to 2018. So she said she could look, but she remembers.
They not have records.
So just out of curiosity, where's the person working right now? Where they work?
Yeah, they work for an agency and
That you don't require supervision?
They should be having a contract from supervision right now if they're doing it there.
well, they aren't doing. Oh, I don't think that's the.
Let's try to clarify, because the requirement is, once they are approved to take tests, they still have to be in supervision until they have the test, correct?
I believe they're working somewhere with an.
That's why I said we
Depending on
want
their
to
job.
clarify the last
Well,
4
we
years.
had that.
I believe they're.
We looked at it and it didn't seem like it was
I did ask it out loud.
Okay.
It's not a clinical job. It would be
I think whatever that was correct.
oh, actually, that was it. That you did ask.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll double check too before.
Well,
we approve it.
and that's, that's fine.
Let's find out what it is.
It's a long time to that. Yeah, between the supervision time.
Yeah, well, I mean, she wouldn't have been able to be in a job.
No. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, are we? Any questions?
For me, I would work only after finding out
I
the
would
last 4 years.
But the reason, a concern I would have is some private entities may not be as sticklers about
Yeah.
licensure, and they may have allowed somebody who has who has a master's degree and probably a CSW, which is a clinical license, they might have allowed this person to work in a quasi-clinical or without having the supervision that we require. I would just want to verify that. I'm totally fine with it if she's not been working in a clinical job.
So I think we do need, at least for me to vote, I'm just saying, when I say for me to vote, I want some kind of references from her saying the places she has worked and the capacity, what capacity, with job description since the last time it was approved. It's so long, man. That's 4 years. Especially since we can't look at the hours, which I understand. By default, she had one
Yeah.
in 2020 that we somehow cannot look at
We
anymore.
were just asked the question of,
Yeah.
do we need to look at her hours? Would we accept them? That was what we were asked.
So we probably need
We
to
just
hours.
assumed that had been cleared by
So
Yeah,
we
staff.
need to refer it back to staff to get the verification for you guys.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably better.
That work?
So if I get the information and
Yeah.
defer it till next month.
Defer-
Yeah, the last 4 years where she has worked,
And then what capacity?
Job
every place she has worked was not clinical and because the requirements, she has to be supervised until she passed the licensure, which,
Right.
you even require that, right? You require added piece of supervision hours once they pass the test.
Yeah, there's a
Right.
continued supervision.
Continuous
form they have to
supervision, so we need something from her saying, once she's getting supervision, or maybe not working at all, which is fine, right?
Probably search too far did the supervisor officially terminate the contract or how was that handled?
There's nothing in the file. We looked in our archives and there's nothing there.
Yeah, the person that we spoke to, they left that job, so that's why they.
That's why they, yeah.
Okay, anything prior to 2018 is really, there's not a lot of records for. I mean,
Yeah.
just unfortunately. unfortunately.
Well, she could give us a detailed accounting of where she's been working and
Right.
doing what.
We can do that, we can go from there.
And it's probably fine, but I agree with Santosh, for me to vote on that, I just feel like I wanna make sure I'm doing my due diligence and making sure to double check.
Yeah, I think we don't have to establish the hours because we approved in 2018, 2020 when there were
Yeah.
200 hours requirement, so they exceed the requirement today.
Yeah.
Right.
So
That's fine,
established.
that was just the
Good point.
question we were
No,
asking.
no, you answered, you did well, you did fine.
Ours is fine.
Okay, all right, so we need a full motion to defer this one. That's a full motion to, I'll make the motion to defer.
I can see that was correct.
I'll make it defer.
Second.
Second. All in favor of deferring? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
That's it?
That's it. Thank you all. Very good, very good. All right, moving on to old business, ASWB, dates there for, nothing new, that's, I know of.
Did I tell you that I'm on the slate?
Yeah, and yeah, you did, but he is officially on the slate for the nominating committee. So,
So ASWB will cover my expenses to
right,
get there.
to get to the delegate assembly, so. Hey,
Is anyone else? going?
anybody else interested in going to the delegate assembly? It's in San Diego, you won't get to see the zoo unless you go on your own, but.
It's
Love to, but
November
I have
8th
a
and
conference I
9th,
have to
right?
go to the very next week.
What day of the week is it?
It's like usually it starts on Thursday, usually you travel on Wednesday, so you can go to the board member exchange on Thursday, and then the assembly's Friday, Saturday, and leave on Sunday.
Are you going? Are you going?
Did you say it's the 8th and 9th?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a Friday, Saturday.
Friday,
But it
Saturday,
starts really Thursday.
Thursday,
Oh, okay.
there's a pre-meeting.
So if we're to go, the board will reimburse, correct?
Mine is paid for because I'm a
No,
candidate.
for like, for us commoners.
That's what the vote is for. That's what the vote is for.
Right.
Yes, I would like to.
If you'd like to go, okay. all right.
Is that for their, is that the annual meeting?
Yes.
The
it's-
delegate.
Do they have anything for attorneys? Is
No.
Dale Atkins gonna do?
Hey, he will do something, but it's not necessarily for attorneys.
Okay.
I mean, you're welcome to go if you want.
I haven't seen an agenda. I don't know what's
I
relevant or
wonder
not.
if the education meeting in the spring might be more relevant
That
as an
would
attorney.
probably-
This is more.
This is more business stuff, this,
Okay, I haven't seen an agenda and I didn't know if there was a section for
yeah, he
attorneys.
does a presentation for education meeting in May.
I'll look for that in May and see if there's something good.
I'm on the planning committee for that, so I'll.
Plan
I'll
something
let you know.
for lawyers.
Okay.
It's a
So
good-
do we have to register with ASWB?
Yes,
No.
you do it
Yes,
online.
right, you-
Is it already open?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes, it's
It's
open.
open.
And I think the conference itself is free. You'll just have to, you'll have to book your travel and the board will reimburse you.
The hotel is on
Okay.
site?
Hotels on site, yeah.
It's online
It's
there.
all
Yes.
registered.
So let's first see if we get a complimentary time off from.
Complimentary time on.
Right, that's important, right?
It's important, matter social work.
Hey, don't have
He works for the VA, so he gets a lot of perks.
Well, we could vote on,
Yeah, I would like to do it.
Yeah, right, I would say we want to approve the expenditure for Santos to go.
Yeah.
Sounds better than Milwaukee where I get to go.
I'll let your.
So you want to move
I
that?
would move that the board pay the travel expenses for Santos.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Tiff. All right, good deal. There's a meeting next week with an NASW group that's meeting about the testing thing. It's on Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. It's a virtual meeting. If I can't attend because that's the same day as the compact meeting, but
It's an NASW meeting. you
it's an
said?
NASW, so if you're a member of NASW, I don't think you have to be a member, but then you can join because they're having this forum of some different boards or people from different states that have eliminated the exam. So that would be if you wanted to attend on that.
What day?
It's the 17th.
Yeah, and it's just a few chapters.
You're right, it's just
It's
like,
not sponsored
it's not
by.
a full conference meeting or something, it's just the information for y'all if you would like to attend. Something like that, because, you know, when it's 3 p.m. Eastern time, it's online, I got to link if you're interested in hearing, what's being said.
Okay, Tuesday. That's right.
It's a Tuesday, yeah.
It just might be interesting.
Yeah, right, it would, yeah. The title is to test or not to test. So,
Where do we get the link?
I've got it, I can send it to you.
I can't promise. but-
Right.
Can
Yeah, I
never
know,
promise
right, when
anything
schools
this
get
week.
out, right, when schools get out.
It'll be in your NASW newsletter coming out.
Yeah, right, if you remember NASW, you'll be in there,
So the title of the conference is to test or not to test?
yeah.
And I guess the answers are yes, no, all of the above, some of the above.
I think that's the answer,
There are only three options.
Yeah.
Okay,
but anyway,
maybe.
so,
Maybe.
uh, application software, I don't think we have any updates on that, do we, that I know of, they're still working on, the staff is cleaning up, and Brooke, our new, staff member is also helping with that, so that's continuing. You should find the agenda for the compact meeting and the link for that on the agenda, it's a public meeting. So if you want to join that, you can, it starts at, 10 Eastern time. It's all day. About 5 p.m. until. It's all day. It's up to me a pretty, hopefully, since, council on social, on state government says, we've done this before, we can get through all these items, but to me, it looks pretty tight to do all in one day. So we shall see how that goes. But again, you're welcome to join, or anybody else, if anybody asks about it, it's a public meeting, so they can.
Who are the commission delegates?
That each of the 22 states,
Okay,
and I'm the delegate for Kentucky,
okay,
so Mark will be there as well as alternate delegate.
okay.
So there's all the 22 states plus professional organizations like NASW, CSW, CSW, Clinical Society, ASWB, will have representatives there too. So. The initial, I guess, hopefully it'll set, what meetings are happening and how often and get the executive, structure and everything going. Regulations, okay, first one up is again our favorite one, supervision, right? We got through 4 sections last time, so if we could hopefully get through another 4 sections today. So if we were kind of find section 5. You like on the second page, or top right, section 5. Had a chance to read through it, find any questions. And Mr. Nichols is our help us with formulating regs, so a great asset to help us with that. Change mental disorders to just disorders, because if you use just mental disorders, it tends to it may be interpreted as not including addiction, so just as disorders. A few minor things, but I guess story on the next page, number 10. Yeah, we've discussed this before, we did telehealth, so that's basically the same wording we use there. And then down to number 13, and then there's new section 6. So 13 is both supervisor, supervisee maintain a contemporaneous record of the date, duration, type, individual group, in other words, documentation of their supervision times, so that we may have a record submitted to the board. So hopefully avoid situations like we ran into in the application because they have submitted it to the board. That's the idea there, so that, we can do it upon request, but also if it's said that, if we make some kind of stipulation that it's done more often, you know, the board can request it any time during the roughly 2 years. Or should it be done every 6 months or every year, something like that, you know. We've, in the complaint committee, we've had to request these logs, and sometimes we get them quite handwritten, and they're very difficult to read, that's why it says typed in as a readable format. Sorry.
So if I'm reading this right, you can have up to 15 supervisors, is that correct?
Well, let's back up, that's one step ahead of me.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted, number 13, the idea there was to maintain some kind of the requirement to maintain the documentation, because we've had nothing, they should. And then should we require it to be submitted to us or just upon request? My question.
Either way, would it be possible for us to provide a format?
Yeah.
That suggested,
Yeah.
a suggested
Sure.
table to fill out, because I think that.
Yep.
I understand the idea of letting people create whatever they want, but I think that deters people from doing it. But if we had even an example that was listed on our website, that said, here's an example format to document supervision.
What a lot of people use, which is probably might be overkill, but it's usually the easiest, is to have an Excel spreadsheet, so you can add up the hour and keep goals.
Well, you know, the temporary permit
Yeah, we had
has,
one, yeah.
has a log sheet
Yeah.
with it,
Okay.
So we could just use
so
that.
we could adopt that.
You can do it two ways. You can mandate it by requiring it and having a form incorporated by reference and say, we will only accept them on this form that is incorporated and we are providing to you. That's mandating it. The second way is permissive, to say, we have a form that you can use if you want to use, but as long as we can read it and it's legible, you can write it on the back of a cocktail napkin and we'll take it.
Well, maybe we don't need to go that far.
Well, for
Give
permission,
them ideas.
Okay, a beer tab instead of a cocktail
yeah,
napkin.
if it's permissive, then that's what we're up to. I don't think they're requiring.
But we could say this may be required for submission
This is
on
the form,
request, so it's
this is the form where you.
encouraged that you complete this.
So as of right now, the board may ask for a log, correct? Mark? As of right now, the board can ask for a detailed.
Yes.
If they're right.
Sometimes they submit the law with the supervised experience documentation form. I mean, sometimes we get it automatically, but I mean, it's not.
But you can ask it anytime you got it.
Right. It's not anything that we've been diligent about.
Right.
I do think there could be utility to asking for it, because that way, if we ever get in a situation with the like, I mean, I understand to them, it might be an extra step, it might be a hassle. However, if we run into like this applicant, who's like, my supervisor has disappeared into the wild blue yonder or doesn't have any record of this, we have a record.
And that's something I've been communicating to supervisors and new supervisors, is that they are responsible for supervised experience documentation form at the end of supervision. Like, they need to go ahead and do that, even if the supervisee isn't ready to test yet. But if that supervision relationship is ending, they need to go ahead and submit that, because it happens a lot that we don't have documented hours for people. Just for that reason, because they're like, well, we terminated and they weren't ready to test, so I didn't do them.
Well, yeah, but we already had supposed to submit that already. This just says basically when you do, submit the law. Basically.
I think making a requirement, like, I know at the CADC board, it requires for you to submit the date, hours, and either face-to-face or group or telehealth, whatever it is. So that mandates somebody to keep track. You're not sitting there like a year after trying to figure out what days that.
I think Jeanette is trying to speak.
Yeah, I'm in favor of it being included in the regs too. I actually had a note on that because I think consistency is important. And I think it also kind of elevates the importance of that supervision and says, we feel strongly enough about this that you have to monitor it in this way and you have to report it in that way. And I just think it does a little something extra to elevate the requirement.
Why it's written that way, Justin. And again, it's like requesting it we can request it anytime, basically how this works is anytime, but especially was Mark saying when they submit the documentation form, and if we don't get that and don't get together, and I like giving them a format to follow is much easier than make up your own, and I don't want it written on the back of a cocktail.
No,
You can't read it and can't verify.
If you could read it, it could be written on the
Yeah,
back.
it might be, so.
Yeah, I have my own Excel sheet I create that I sign and the supervisor signs at the same time. Acknowledging, yeah, we made this day this long, but I give them a copy once the full page is full, so they can't have a copy, just in case something happens to me.
Yeah.
They have to get, I have a copy.
That's why it's like consideration, I always like to give it to them monthly and have them sign it and I sign it so that in case something happens to me, they've always
have
got
it.
a record.
Right, right.
But again, not what we want to do here, that's too much detail, but here, if they submit it with the documentation form, I think that would be, and was requested.
could we possibly, now this might be going too far, but you know, like with our CEUs, we have a way for them to track and record that within our system. I wonder if there might be some utility to having it automated where they could update it.
That would be
And
good.
it would have to be sent on to the supervisor to sign off on. I mean, I think about the way we do time sheets in the universities. I do it and then I send it, my supervisor clicks it and it's good. And it would be there.
I think
The
that would be.
technology is possible.
It is possible.
I think that's very helpful, and all I can relate is with the CNDC board, I actually did something this week. Where my supervisor who entered the hours based on the form I had filled out electronically, and as soon as he entered it. It puts back a notification on my portal and asking me to go back and review all the hours of the day, and I had to attest by signing, if these are accurate. So that then the board gets one from supervisor, one from supervisor, and then the board will review it. Probably not a bad idea, probably minimize your guys.
Well, I was gonna say, it save you time. If they put in, I
Yeah.
did these hours on these dates, their supervisor attests that it's correct, and it's just keeping track automatically, and when it's time to sign off on I've completed my hours, they still have to do that form. But there's a better paper trail.
Sounds kind of similar to practicum hours
Right.
that you do with Tavera.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, thank you, because I was just gonna ask Janessa.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that is a wonderful idea. I was getting ready to jump in there and say that too, Annie, that I think it'd be great if we could track it in the system, especially because the regs say that we can request those at any time, right? If it's already in the system, if we have any question or any concern, there's no reason why we couldn't pull those up and take a look. It also lets us gather a little more data too, right? Because we can always run reports on that kind of information and see, are people actually getting the supervision that they're saying they're doing without having to deal with paper forms. That way, I think it could give us a lot of insight that we wouldn't necessarily have with a paper reporting.
Yeah, I think inputting the data like every week in real time, maybe just too much.
Well, maybe once a month or
Yeah,
every
there's
quarter.
a periodic or something, maybe a yearly submission of hours or something, but I think going live, it might be too much for people who have a lot of supervising.
And at the same time, though, it might make it easier for them. If they're doing it right in that moment, they don't have to stop and take an hour out of their day to go back and do all the supervision. So I think it may just depend on personal preference and personal supervision approaches too.
Good ideas.
While we're at it, we can also ask for them to upload whatever version of, the feedback, the mutual feedback
Oh,
that the
yeah.
supervisor and the
Yeah,
supervisee are to give one another
Yeah,
as a reminder that that's supposed to be done every 6 months.
that would also be something to upload so that when you get the documentation form ready for testing, it's all there. You know, I see if you left it up to me, all of it would be automated.
Well, I think
You would fill out the contract online, all of that would be done and you would have it.
why not do that?
I mean, it would be looking at another software purchase probably, but it would be,
A separate software?
well, our application software system. Probably, they have the expertise to add stuff, which would be another expense, but it would be automating all of those forms. Obviously, we still have the paper in case it was needed, but then all of it would be automated. And all the staff would have to do is look at it, because thing is with the automated stuff, it's like with the application system, it will notify them when things are due, stuff like that, and it could notify the licensee or the supervisor as well as staff about when things are due.
Well, and it reduces carbon footprint as well, right? When we're talking about,
Well, that's another added benefit sometimes.
it is, and well,
But
and
we
it
can't
does
go
increase
too far.
efficiency too, I think. It allows our our staff to be able to do other things that are much more important than having to chase down paperwork or file paperwork. And I just think that's an important part of it.
So if you want, I can explore.
I like that idea.
solutions.
We have money
Yeah,
and I say
I
that's
know.
a better use of it than letting it sit in a bank account and possibly getting taken back by the state.
I couldn't be more.
Which they can only do at any time.
Yes.
That's my humble opinion.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. It's kind of like, make things more efficient for what we're doing. That's the approach with the applications piece. So it's approaching people who do this for a living and saying, how much will it cost us to put this in place?
I think it increases professionalism too, because I really think sometimes the problems we get into with people where they don't update their information or all this other stuff is because it's been sort of lackadaisical.
Yeah.
And not by any one person or anything like that. It's just the way we approached it. And I think this increases professionalism if we are more structured, not trying to be strict and difficult or unreasonable, but it just may make it easier for everyone involved.
Well, whatever makes contracts, all contracts legible.
We're pro
Love that.
Yeah, that's the piece that I was going after for you, Mark, on that one.
Mhm.
That's
I'm
why I
all
put it in here on this part, at least it's readable format, so we can. Anyway, okay, well.
Hey,
thank y'all.
before you move on, I just wanted to say, Hank, if there's not an option with the software to do that sort of thing, could we explore looking at using the DocuSign system? Because we could design the forms ourselves.
That would automatically come with it. We'd have to use either DocuSign or Adobe
Okay.
or some system like that for signatures, yeah. That's
Awesome.
been a holdup because, Mark and I, we've discussed this with Tyler Technologies already. And it was kind of like, okay, which direction are we gonna go? The application is doing that, getting our back office was a higher priority, so glad to hear y'all say this, because then we can continue with this part of it. Because
Well, that's the beauty of having a new board member who's trying to catch
I
up,
know.
right? I'll ask all the weird questions.
That's okay. That is quite okay. Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you. The next section is new, and Mark, sometimes says you're correct that we did. The idea of having an additional supervisor, we've had this in the rig, but there's been nothing to specify kind of their duties and also how many additional supervisors they can supervise each, so we can have. Trying to clean up the database for our applications and stuff. We've discovered some issues with this, and so the 9 is just an arbitrary figure out through end. Because we've had the 6, and you're right, if you had the 6 and the 9, the person could have 15. Other boards have a similar kind of thing that they do. Some have that you can have supervisor record for, well, but we don't. We want the supervisor record, keeping that at 6. I'm okay with that. It's just an additional supervisor, if there are additional limiting that, because hopefully one person didn't have the large number of additional supervisors that we discovered. But hopefully that wasn't going on, because the limiting it limits. The idea of limiting it, that I see one of the things is making sure the supervisor is not just, oh, let's just check in at lunch for supervision. That is, it should be more formal meeting with the supervisee. doesn't, and the limiting basically the number helps with that, so that they're not responsible in addition, because there's nothing basically. And we are very free, so what y'all think about this, it's like, I can leave a supervisor record, have 10 extra supervisors, not do any of it. I farm it out to everybody. That's kind of the way it looks. Well,
I thought the supervisor at record was to be doing the primary supervision and the additional supervisor might be doing the grading.
that's what we intended, but that's not what it was said. So we need to be clear about that. That's why I added the section to kind of help start that discussion, because we don't want supervisor of record to wander out.
Well, I wonder if we need to clean that up instead of limiting, because I was just thinking, like devil's advocate, what if a person has been in clinical practice for 30 years and they decide, I don't want to do direct care, but I'm gonna run groups as my job, and I'm gonna have multiple supervision groups, and I'm gonna be a supervisor of record for 6 people.
Yeah.
You know, for us to limit the extra people to 9, that might limit.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't have a problem with somebody trying to do that with that level of experience, as long as what they're doing was appropriate, so.
But that's one of the issues I see. Oh, yeah, I understand that, but
I just wonder if we clean up how we explain what primary or supervisor of record means.
yeah,
that
it might take care of this.
If we said you are to meet with your supervisee 1 hour, or is that not what, I don't remember exactly what it says.
Well, we'll get to that one in a
Okay.
little bit, but the 2 hours every 2 weeks kind of thing.
So you are correct, as we stand, unless I have not read it well, you could get away with not meeting with your primary supervisor at all, as long as you have additional supervisor you're meeting once a week, right? As of right now, you could
As of
actually
right now.
do that and be in compliance, that you have a
I would
supervisor
not
record.
suggest anybody doing that.
People, you could, but if you look, you could have a supervisor record, and 3 weeks into it, you found an additional supervisor of record and never met with the supervisor of record at all. As long as you have the minimum hours from additional, you are in compliance, right?
Right. As
People
long
just-
as somebody fills out the supervised experience
Yes,
documentation.
yes. As of right now, there's a loophole,
That's kind of
and
how
you
that.
can do that and be in compliance.
So,
Well, we would want to leave allowance for what if your supervisor of record is ill and out of
Yeah,
work for 3
that's why you need
months.
So I think we have,
That's an.
I think we have to have a numeric hours requirement for the supervisor of record that you have to meet
Yeah.
with your supervisor at least
if you, well,
twice a month, or whatever it is, there has to be a number of hours that the applicant, the super licensee has to meet with the supervisor, right? We don't have that right now.
No.
A lot of people actually never meet with the supervisor record after they attend the additional, if they're with close proximity.
Yeah.
And it is okay as of right now, our requirement, it doesn't have any requirement.
you could read it that way. Yeah, not that to the board, but you
Yeah.
could read it that way. Yes.
And maybe in larger systems that happen, like that just kind of blows my mind, like that's actually happening.
Apparently, it happened in another state that I know of.
Okay.
That's why it brought that to my attention when we
Alright.
discussed it. It's not, oh, wow.
Sometimes people may even find it easier
Yeah.
to add a additional supervisor instead of redoing the whole thing again.
Yeah, yeah,
Keep the supervisor is intact, their intent has now changed to get a supervisor from person B.
Yeah.
Instead of redoing the contract, add some supervisor, and I don't think there's anything that prevents. Right, I don't think it's right to do that, probably not the wisest thing, but.
I always strongly communicate to supervisees that the relationship that they have is with their supervisor of record.
Yeah.
Not their
Not
additional
their additional.
supervisor.
Yeah.
That their additional supervisor is like a special guest star.
yeah.
Typically, group supervision would run to be a.
Yes.
So we'll discuss a little bit more on that, because it's a critical issue, as you can tell. Notice to the client, we tried to work on that one, it's kind of like, it goes back to that we have, the issue is a supervisee is to notify their clients that they have a supervisor. Okay? That's not always done. In fact, in the marketing materials that I see now, CSWs advertise and they don't even say they have a supervisor, and it's easy to interpret CSW when they put it on their files, et cetera. It looks like, and they put under their name clinical social worker. Technically, they are, as long as they have a supervisor. But you could look at the title under their name and say CSW is what it means. That's not what it means in our state. It might mean that somewhere else, but not here, without the notice of supervisor. So that's part of this. Why it's written the way it is. And we have to look at, we're in a virtual world too, so you can't just hang something on the wall and expect people to read it when they're not in your office. So it has to be done some other way. So that's the effort to try to address those issues there. All marketing or promotional material shall contain a notice that provides the right status. I know what it needs to be here, but maybe also in the code of conduct, I don't know. But anyway, that's just why that's there. Verification of license, that they could go to the board website, basically what that means. You know, and basically notifying the client about what the client needs to be part of informed consent, that if I'm the supervisor for this CSW know, the client knows that the CSW is going to discuss that person with me as the supervisor. That's the intent, because that's the relationship. So it's a tie-in that the client needs to be aware of. So that's where all of that would come from.
But provide for means in the consent information, not. That's referring to what provided physically or electronically, you're talking about the informed consent, okay.
Yeah, now probably, again, wording is still be work on wording. It's like, that's when Mike or Mark can help us with that, to get the intent down into the language here. If that's for us to address. Do it. All right, well, it's,
Another small
go ahead.
edit.
Yeah.
This is going backward a bit, under 9, B. For maybe inclusive language, we might say that a social security and income tax deducted from their salary,
where
instead of his or her,
we can't use
or
that,
we're not allowed to.
we're not allowed to in the state of Kentucky. His, her is all right.
The English teachers are in charge.
Yes. Sorry, already tried that.
Okay, I was just like, oh,
Okay.
all right. Duly noted.
Sorry. Didn't have that one. With the regulators.
Okay, okay.
But those who have the words, if there's certain words you can't use. Can't use that. Right.
Okay. Don't say we didn't try.
I know. Oh, yeah, there we go then. It's getting time-wise, we got some other things on the agenda. Do you want to stop discussion at this point? At this point, we'll pick it up the next session, next month. Do read section. Now, if you leave the additional sections, there's a new section 8, number to change, but Santos said minimum hours per supervisor, whatever. We tried to address it in his section, so read that for everybody to read through that.
Yeah, in that, I would even.
Yeah, I mean, we can, these are just arbitrary numbers, so.
No, no, I would even say, that's great that, your 75 of that have may, no more than 75 may come from additional.
Yeah.
But people might do the first 75 from.
I know.
Man, to prevent, what I was whispering to her I was saying 2 loopholes.
Yeah,
as in,
right.
Because this thing was created some time ago and so we have to have a new number.
Right, we have to have a new number, so.
So that way, it's not up to interpretation, they say,
Yeah.
you have to meet with your primary supervisor.
Yeah.
2 hours a month or 4, whatever number we come up with.
But
So I
we
think
keep
you're
it
checking
specified.
with
Yeah.
the primary supervisor.
Right, 'cause, yeah,
And if they're unavailable or move away or whatever, you need to update your record.
Yeah,
Have
you
a
update
new
it,
primary supervisor.
your additional supervisor could be a primary supervisor.
and then take note of the next piece about temporary suspension of contract, which is quite involved. So we will have a long discussion on that, I'm sure, which we should, so we'll move on to the next, part. Just do keep in mind that we are going to be working on the code of ethical conduct. We do have to finalize the continuing education rate. We have the fees rate and the exam rate that we have in the hopper, so to speak. So do keep in mind that we will be, as we finish this, we'll be moving on to, because we'd like to submit rates, not just one at a time, but so to speak as a batch. So we'll have to determine which one to do. The student intern committee, I grouped, Catherine, Janessa. Pronounce Catherine's last name for me again, please.
Gold.
Gold. Catherine Gold is the incoming president. She's president-elect for KASWE. And so she was joining the committee. And when I joined her to the meeting link and sent out some cancellation notices, so not everybody could come, but Janessa joined and Catherine and Brenda from the ASW. And so we did have a discussion, which was great. And so I've put together for you all some of the thoughts that we've discussed. If we go the route of a provisional license for students, because this is addressing the student intern issue, is what it's all about. We would have to initiate a law change to allow us to issue a provisional license in the first place. But these are just some of the things that we've gone over, about, they have to have a transcript, they have to have basic, some basic education. And maybe in the last practicum of their MSW program, or maybe the last two at most, they would be doing diagnosis, it's kind of like finding the scope of practice, transitioning from, the other issue was that I thought, students are learning, so we don't want to hamper the process of learning because we expect students to make mistakes. And normally that's handled with the university program as first, so that would be the first step, refer to the board if necessary. Obviously, the board could revoke a provisional license kind of thing, but we want it to be a learning process and a focus on rehabilitation versus punitive approach. So that's in there. The discipline. There's some things about employment. One of the things before this last meeting, we've contacted people who had accepted student interns, and took a couple of things of feedback was, one, that would be a great idea because we have students who come and on different levels of education. And employers go, well, if they're in their first practice, they don't have enough academic experience to even qualify, so they have to turn them away. And they said if the board had a provisional license, it would vet that process some and would help them and not have to do that on their own. That was one of the biggest feedback from employers and people who accept student interns. And so they were in favor of us doing something like this to help them with student interns.
So this would be targeting students who are doing clinical practice.
Well, yeah, that's all. Yeah, right now, that's all it is. Yeah,
Okay.
it's just for the students who would be in a track to become to
Clinical practice.
clinical practice, which is not broad scope.
Okay, because I was like, with
Oh.
MSW students who are doing micro placements.
Yeah, yeah, right, this is that because of the
So
issue.
is this inclusive of the MSSW program?
Yeah, some of us have that.
Yes, we can end that anyway. So that's just some of the issues that we brought up so far. One of my little issues, maybe not little, but anyway, Janessa said I was asking for the moon, but I think it needs to be a limited caseload. So students don't get overwhelmed. As far as issuing license, it's kind of like, well, with us, it's kind of like it has to be like 6 months, like the temp license is 6 months and renewable for 6 months. I don't know what this would be, but we would have to operate on dates kind of thing rather than semester dates. So we would have to address the issue if they're not in school, can they still do it? Can they still work for the agency because the agency would like that? That was their feedback. Well, if you do it for 6 months, can they work after they finish their practicum hours? And it's kind of, well, no, I hadn't thought about that, but it's kind of, well, that might be an option for employers if they wanted to continue along. So to a certain extent, in their last semester, say they finished in the last week of April. They've applied to take their exam, they can transition to the temporary license if they didn't pass the exam and then still work for the agency because they had the experience wanting to still work for them. You wouldn't have the continuity, they said, well, we wouldn't have the continuity of care issue because we wouldn't have to end of the semester. They could transition easier with continuity of care with patients that they had if they weren't going to keep them on. But employers that I talked to said, yeah, if we take student interns because they want to keep them. So it would be looked at a way of facilitating that, so.
Well, because the schools don't wanna, I mean, when they're finished with their internship, the school says, we're done.
Oh, right,
We
yeah,
don't want
yeah.
oversight of what you're.
Right, yeah, they don't want to force it. So, but the employers said, well, we would like to continue it, so. It's like, oh, okay, we'll just have to look at that, you know, piece of it.
Or maybe we can have something in place where they can apply a couple of weeks prior to actually obtaining the degree by providing unofficial transcript or some sort. So there is no gap. If somebody wants to transition their intern directly from the last year intern on a Friday to a paid employee on Monday, they could still do that. By having some sort of way of applying beforehand. Right, so that way, you know, if they want to work, they continue to see the patient as a master's level, you know, professional, they can do that. But it has to be applied beforehand, allow you guys or board enough time to process or approve. If not, there'll be a gap. Right?
So it's kind of like making sure we don't have gaps if we can avoid it to, you know, just like we did with the temporary permit, making sure this process doesn't create problems that work closely with it. Catherine's gonna take the ideas and take it to the KSW, should my acronyms correct, business meeting on October 4th to get the reaction from the other schools and give some feedback the next week. So.
Hank, I'm wondering if after we get some of that initial feedback, because I'm not sure how Whitney feels about it, but and Laura, but I think there will be some pushback on this. And I've shared that before in the student intern committee and why I think that is. I'm wondering if it might be worthy for us to have a separate listening session or some sort of a meeting just with educators to hear those concerns straight from them. Not that the, KASWE representatives aren't going to do a great job. I just think it might be important for us to have maybe some sort of virtual forum where folks could come and share in their own voice what they're feeling, what their thoughts are about it, how it'll impact their school, maybe even have an opportunity for students to give some feedback there. I just think that is very important to everybody being heard, especially if this is something that moves forward and there is some pushback. I think folks at least need to know that they're being heard and that we will do everything in our power as a board to make sure that everyone is properly taken care of. Of course, with the understanding that the public is first and that that's our role is to take care of the public. But I do think that we need to take some time and really hear from those folks in person.
And I think that's a great point because I don't think we're anywhere near making a decision about this. This is just
Right.
an idea at this point. So don't think it is, it's kind of like there's a process to this and I think it's important because it's a significant step. To make sure everybody is heard. And so it's like, there's no timeline, that we gotta get this done by the next date or whatever. So please don't keep that, please don't be letting that out or saying that because there is no timeline. It's basically because we've had cases with student interns practicing without a license. And the board, the collect committee in particular is not real wanting to sanction students for learning. That's what it is. So we want to provide a process, but it's kind of like the protection of the public and gatekeeper roles and stuff like that, we have to look at as far as our responsibility and see what's out there.
Well, we know students are put in a vulnerable position,
Right.
and I think the reason they get in those spots is because they're asked to.
Yeah.
And unless we have proper regulation that gives employers guidelines about what you can and can't do, they're gonna keep being put in those positions.
Right,
So,
and I think we're not helping students, continuing, because the way we have been, because it's gonna probably increase, and I just don't. Well, I think as I told you, Jeanette, on the committee, I think we're smart enough to figure this out. And I think it's an issue that we can figure out and address something, even though maybe, and to a certain extent, we're creating a model because we couldn't find anything to answer what we want to do. Other states are doing different things, but none of them are answering the question we want to answer. So we're actually, but it is not a thing that is no means, yes, I think it's, a separate listening session or something like that. After KSWE might be able to recommend that we can, or might sponsor something like that for us so that we can talk about all this so that everybody gets heard, but
I can tell you that well, this is me putting an educator hat on. I hope that's okay. If it's not, you can fuss at me. UPAC is sponsoring the KASWE spring conference. And so I would be more than happy for there to be, to spend some time, that maybe the evening before or something, and, give some folks some food, and we could sponsor that and have them be able to talk in person. Maybe the board could come out to Pikeville and spend a little time with them. I mean, that might be, and listen, I come to you all, so you all can come to me too. But it might be a good thing to do. And if you feed them, they will come. That's what we say in Appalachia, right? If you feed them, they'll come.
I'll come. I haven't been to Pikeville in a while, so I'll be glad to come.
But I mean, if we're not in that much of a hurry, to do that, and when we're not, then we would be more than happy to host something there during that time, because that's important. And we usually have a pretty good turnout with the KSWE, and we could also set it up to where there's a virtual piece as well. I just think that's really important. And that's also the spring conference where students are. So we might even be able to get some student feedback.
I would like to get students' feedback if we could, so spring would be good probably.
Yeah, and I think it helps to strengthen the relationship between our universities and the board, which is always important.
It always is important,
Yeah.
right? It's a key piece that
Well, so keep that in the back of your mind. I'd be more than happy to take care of that.
Okay, good, thank you. Yeah, but please not, it's just, the committee hasn't recommended anything to the board yet. These are just thoughts and ideas, just to bring you up to date to report. That's all it is. And then, it's not for us to make any decisions today.
and the next meeting of that is October.
The
14
14th,
for
yeah,
us.
for the student.
Oh, sorry, for us.
Yeah, no, the
Student committee.
committee's 14th.
Okay.
I will say about this employment piece, because a lot of the students that come on with my employer coming on and going through a lot of the same like employee startup process that I went through. So the students doing the same thing, getting paid a stipend by my employer while they're doing it. I do think that something like this I guess it's like essentially as you're a student practicing underneath this potential provisional license, I think it allows that connection to the board and to being able to, I don't know, I feel like it would be a little bit of a protection also. Yeah. So, but I was like, this is exactly what we're doing at my, so.
Good. All right.
Before we move on, Hank, I just wanted to say real quick, last month we talked a little bit about an LMSW license. And I know that's not clinical in nature, but if we're going to do something like that, we would also need to include that in this process as well.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's another piece and we can't rush that either. We have to, in other words, there's no point in us go, okay, well, let's have a license. Nobody's gonna apply for it. And do they understand what it is, why we're doing it or like that? So, yeah, that would be, wouldn't want to juxtapose that on the student part, but at the same time, some other time, maybe we could do that with educators too, because it. I don't know, anyway, just think about it, keep that in mind, because I don't want to lose that, in this discussion.
Right. And we would also, I need to think about the provisional license with that one as well. I know it's not clinical in nature, but if we're going to be regulating,
Right.
that's important.
It's important, yeah, sure, definitely.
So the next meeting of that group is October 14th, and that's our board meeting. I thought it was the 17th.
October 14th is the board meeting.
Right, so this meeting, that group.
That group doesn't meet till the 17th.
Okay.
Committee doesn't meet till the 17th, right?
Okay.
Sorry. Lost all dates here.
We are off on the 14th.
Yeah.
The board is not off.
Okay. Yeah. That's right. Okay, moving along to more, to other substantial issues. Mr. Brigham, Mark and I met with, Children's Lines, with Children's Lines, on the NSW, maybe could be there, I don't think, from Clinical Society. And we discussed, the issues around the telehealth, law. And, there's one issue that was referred back to the board for the discussion is, and I sent this out to you ahead of time. Is the connection between our law and KRS 211-336. You should have a copy of that. I'd like for you to start with KRS 211-336. There's 3 sections to that law. One is the shall, the second is the shall not, and the third is, you can call it the may section, may do section. And mainly concentrate on, look at the shall not section. And Janessa, did you get this?
I did. I think so. And before you move on, Hank, I just wanted to say that meeting of the next student intern committee is October the 10th.
Yeah, okay.
It's the 10th. Yeah, at 3:30 Eastern.
Right, well, could we potentially change that, I wonder, since we got some members here?
That's the invite that I got from you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah, we did
said.
change it because there was a conflict with
Right,
some
yeah,
folks being
right.
out or something. Yeah.
Right, so, if we could do, 2 p.m. with that.
On the
work?
10th.
On the 10th.
I don't see any reason why we couldn't do that. I just wanted to make sure we got that date right for folks that may be watching and.
10th, right. At 2 p.m., which is your.
I can't be there, but that's the whole time. I've got to teach class. I don't know.
All right, let's do 2 p.m. Okay, I'll resend out the invite for everybody, see if we.
Actually, I think it's 3:30 to 4:30 Eastern, 2:30 to 3:30 Central Time.
So we'll make it 2 p.m. Eastern time.
Okay.
1 p.m., 1 to 2 Central.
Central, yeah.
Okay, I might be able to be there. Okay.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just thought the 17th didn't sound right and had to check my calendar.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to check my calendar to make sure, so I'll resend out the invites to so we can do that. Okay, this has to do with the issue is, we use the expression in our, request for amendment to the law is the location of the social worker. We discussed this back when we did the telehealth rate, and the issue is where is the client and where is the provider or the social worker in this case at the time of service. The law, the 211 talks about the temporary location of the client outside of Kentucky. It does not say anything about the location of the social worker or the provider. It implies it, but it is not there. It doesn't say where the provider can be. And Children's Lines was saying, well, the provider may temporarily be out of state, maybe on vacation or caring for family members. Is that right, Mark? Not sure why somebody would be doing telehealth when they're on vacation, because it kind of defeats the purpose of vacation, but that's their example. That's okay. Take care of a family member, that would be a reason to be out of state, it could be other reasons, but but anyway, it's like, it's so. Maybe that's what was intended in 211, but that's not what's said. If you go over to the may part, they do this. If you look at 3D, it says the board basically could require a telehealth provider be licensed in Kentucky. Or to recognize compact, and of course, at the time we wrote the telehealth rate, the compact wasn't passed, so that's why the language of that's in here. But it's, sort of like they need to be licensed to get paid, which kind of seems to add reimbursement to the issue that we can't address necessarily, but it does bring it into the situation. So I don't think people providing telehealth without being reimbursed. So would allow for requiring the person to be licensed. So that's what our language basically says. It doesn't say they can't be temporarily out of state. It just says if they're in state, be licensed, and if you're out of state, you better check and comply with the law over there. That's all it says. But to say you can't temporarily be out of state, just says if you're out of state, you might want to check and comply with the law where you are and where the client is. That makes sense?
Is that in here or
No,
just like we
no,
need to add that?
that's what our language adds. On this
Okay,
part.
so I
That's
was
what
like-
we're recommending as a revision or an
Okay.
amendment to the law is to specify that because it's not specified here. We're specifying it here. We discussed this and put in our telehealth rate that was turned down. This sort of thing is just elaborating because the compact now exists. It wasn't all submitted that rate, so it is now, and so it's trying to address those issues, but it doesn't say you can't be temporarily out of state. It just says if you are, best check with that board. That's, so it's not in conflict with the law. It doesn't prohibit it. It just says, okay, well, apply with the law over there. That's all we're asking you to do.
Yeah, you do want to be familiarize yourself with reporting laws or whatever that may be in that particular state, different.
Because if you're in another state, reporting laws, mandatory reporting, age of consent, those kind of things start coming into play that are not always the same across state lines.
Yeah.
So it's addressing those issues, which is important to me to address.
Does it say anything about if you were to relocate and be a permanent resident of another state, you must obtain a compact license as opposed to continuing to practice the Kentucky license or living elsewhere?
Well, that's basically what I said.
Okay, because you're essentially a resident somewhere else. If you move to Florida,
It's like, residency laws are not all the same between all the states.
So the concept is the same though.
Yeah, the concept is the same.
But one state may say, if you relocate here, you have to get a new driver's license within 30 days. The other one might say 45 days.
Kentucky has that. You have to be here 6 months to be a resident, but you have to get a driver's license within 30 days? Go figure. Just saying. So this is trying to address that issue. Since the meeting, I had an opportunity to be in a meeting through my NASW connections for other reasons, or an issue of telehealth came up, and we had a lengthy, not a lengthy, but really interesting discussion. And in both states, these people that were on executive directors, people who, they're not like, oh, okay, we don't know the rules. They know the rules. In both states, they said, if you're over here in our state and you don't have a license, you'd be practicing without a license, regardless of what the law in Kentucky says. And if your client is over here, the same thing applies. And then one person, and these are adjoining states, by the way. contiguous with
With
Kentucky.
us,
With us.
okay.
Oh, yeah, these are contiguous states, not.
Not with each other.
Not, not, these not, anyway. The other person said, well, just by the way. We have 2 complaints on 2 of your CSWs. Who are being charged with practice without a license in our state right now, and they quoted this law, and our attorney said, it doesn't matter, you're here in our state, and so is the client. Regardless, so state sovereignty trumps our law. And in those cases, the 2 CSWs are probably gonna be sanctioned for practice without a license.
By the other state.
By the other.
So they're
state.
in the other state and so is their client, but they're
Well,
saying because
that's
of the
two
Kentucky.
two interesting situations. I didn't ask that question. This is how it works. One CSW is in Kentucky, licensed in Kentucky, works in Kentucky, lives in Kentucky. The client is in the other state. But their rule says if the client's over here, you have to be licensed. I don't care where you are. Client's here right now. I don't care if they're temporary. It doesn't say temporary. It doesn't make that distinction. It says if they're physically in this state right now,
You have to be
the
licensed.
provider has to be licensed.
If I may ask, was the client ever living in Kentucky when the
Yes.
therapeutic residency began?
Yeah.
They moved. They were not just visiting Ohio, they moved to Ohio, right?
Well, that's the question. If they went to college there,
They moved,
Could see how that happens a lot where a client
then they moved.
goes to college
Well,
somewhere.
the way our law reads, that they didn't move. The other state says, yes, they did.
So maybe we need to.
So,
Advise our folks.
well, to a certain extent, now, when I look back and look at this, I'm going, well, actually, this is protecting our licensees. The other incident was, the other case is even more interesting. The CSW is licensed in Kentucky, works for an agency in Kentucky, but moved and now lives in that state.
And then understand.
In another state, and is providing telehealth to the same client that they were providing telehealth.
From
But
their
they
home
lived in
into
Kentucky,
their set.
in another state. So they're getting hit twice, because the client's there and they're there.
Oh, the client is in the other state.
Yes. Temporarily, according to our law.
Yeah, but they're licensed in Kentucky, and I'm assuming they're licensed in the other state also.
No, that's.
Oh,
That's the
yeah.
law.
That's why they're.
That's
separate
against
from the other
our,
state.
our rate too, then, right?
That's the way our law, the law 211 reads.
Yeah, but if they move to another state, they should be licensed in that state.
That's not what our law allows them to do. If you interpret this as temporarily, then they can be over that.
Or just get licensed and
So
receive.
they are not seeing.
It's possible that under a certain fact pattern, you would not be violating Kentucky law, but you would be violating the
Yeah,
law of the
so
other
does
state.
that mean they are not seeing anyone in person at that state?
I don't know that much
Because
detail.
that would be practicing in.
I just know that they,
Ohio.
I just know these two CSWs are gonna end up getting sanctioned in the other state because our law is not a defense in that state.
It's a choice of laws issue. It's a choice of laws issue because the law of the other state applies into that fact pattern.
In that fact pattern. So I went back after that discussion, I looked at this again, I go, wow, I hadn't really thought of it so much from, it actually protects our licensees because it says, hey, our law says you can't be over there, but you might want to check with.
It protects them from
It
sanction
protects them
by
from getting
us.
sanctioned, no, by the other state, at the other state.
But I thought you said that their law
No,
supersedes ours.
no, it just says, it tells them, if you need to be licensed over there, get licensed. Check with that board. If you need to be licensed to live in that state.
Alert. Alert.
Alert, is basically what it does.
Danger, danger.
And it's just another piece of that, of why we are asking for that to be in the amendments, just like we had in our telehealth rate. Except now we have the compact language to add to it. But clear? Pretty complicated when it gets down to interstate stuff. That's why we need the compact. It's why the compact is necessary between our adjoining states particularly. But anyway. So are we to? We've already approved through this approach, so we don't really need to change that. I did add two things at the very end there before we gotta move on because it takes a long time, but I did add, I saw that, and I thought about you, and I go, maybe, I don't know. Again, it makes it longer when you add stuff, and I go, do we need to say anything because of the compact, et cetera, do we need to specify in the telehealth law about PA, social workers who are licensed in Kentucky? In this, I don't know.
But I think you've already mentioned here, the federal law trumps
I-
the state laws.
I know, that's
What's
what,
the point of even,
but it's not mentioned in our law that they are, so I'm just wondering whether we need to add it
To
or not.
clarify, are there any other entities that would apply with? Is there
any federal agency?
Yeah, the military.
Yeah, active,
Yeah, so I don't know whether we need to
you
add
could
it.
have a council in postal service,
And then too, stretch it,
Counseling what?
a council in post office.
Oh.
yeah.
You could, I'm not saying they have.
Somebody instead
It
of
could be
saying
any-
VA,
any
you're
agency.
saying you're employed by a federal
They could, I
agency.
said, I'm saying, people think about VA, but who knows, maybe they have a EAP, a counselor.
Yeah, again, for
Employed
clarity's
by the
sake, do
post
we
office.
need to add it? I don't know, I just thought of it. So
We
I-
just might make it more general, like if you're employed by a
That's what
federal
I'm saying,
agency
so
that allows you to
People always
practice.
think about
in
VA,
a
but it's
jurisdiction.
federally still from all.
Yeah. The
The
federal.
transportation authority may have.
Anyway, and then just to muddy it even further, it's like, oh, what if you're out of the country? So I added that one, anyway.
You could be practicing from your yacht floating in international water.
So, again,
Why not?
I don't know.
On your vacation.
Maybe your yacht.
I don't have a yacht.
It's interesting because every time we want to have a discussion about telehealth, that question about being out of country comes up.
Yeah.
And I would say kind of what I put there, basically, well, other countries, there's a lot of countries that don't have licensing like we do at all. And, so it's like in Britain, if you're in Britain or your client's in Britain, it's the health system is, a state system or nationwide system, so you have to qualify under that system to get paid, which makes you eligible to do services. So you can be in the United States. Of course, if you're practicing, if you or your client's out of state, I always tell people, you better check with your liability carrier because I haven't found one yet that would cover me for doing it. So I'll just be doing it totally by risk. If my coverage ends at the,
Well, and that's because the other state would deem it to be the unlawful practice, and your malpractice policy would say, whoa,
that's
we're
right.
not covering anything that's
Which is
unlawful.
exactly what it tells, my policy tells me, if I'm practicing, if my client is in, say Illinois, I mean, when COVID starts, like your client's in Illinois, you better be licensed in Illinois or we won't cover you because it's unlawful practice at that time it would have been, so it's same difference. Anyway. Nice, good, nice.
So do we have all the answers?
No, we don't. We're trying.
A lot of questions.
The other issue was which is brief, the other issue that was a hangup was the emergency suspension of license that we suggested. Mark's gonna pull together some other things for that too.
I need to look at,
Other.
because I can name them off the top of my head, licensure boards that have that by statute as an authorized power of the agency. I don't know, I have to research how many mental health boards have that.
So again, we'll have our next meeting is the 24th of September. And there's a couple other things in the law in revisions that we're talking about. Those were the two big ones.
I think to maintain public protection, to protect the public, that probably is necessary in some very isolated incidents.
Well, and that's what it's meant to be. It's very isolated. It has to be imminent, kind of how it's where Mark's got it very really.
Immediate harm.
Immediate harm.
Yeah,
And again, I think it's important because we got the compact coming.
yeah. And even without that, right now, in the way it is, now, there's nothing safeguarding
Yeah.
the public.
We don't have any safeguard the public.
Well, and I believe you said one of the concerns raised was, well, we're gonna be trying to take people's licenses, and I said, well, where's the data? How many licenses have we revoked?
We're not taking the license, we're just limiting their ability to practice
Right.
for.
I'm just saying, I
period.
think that was a concern that was
Yeah.
raised, and that's not the purpose of this.
So it is, and again, it's in there, we have to have a complaint first. We can't
Right.
just go out. Right.
Correct.
We have to have a complaint.
And the
filed.
statute says so.
Right.
You may take an immediate temporary suspension against a licensee for whom a complaint, investigation, or disciplinary action is pending. So there has to be a complaint, at least a complaint. It also really, with all respect due, elevates you to a higher level of practice because it validates and verifies what you do is important. Because if you don't have that power, it's kind of like saying, you really can't mess anything up. If you steal $250,000 from a client, we'll investigate and get to that later.
And you can keep practicing.
And you can
in the
keep
meantime.
practicing in the meantime, and we'll catch up with you. It'll be 6 or 12 months.
Yeah.
But if you do something really hurtful, you kill a patient.
Yeah.
Or you rob them blind of $250,000, or you have a romantic relationship. That is something that could cause irreparable harm to the public.
Yep.
You can't take back some of those things back.
You can't. So,
And you're the profession that kind of
yeah, we,
has that power for good or bad.
Yeah.
right, so it would, with the way the wording is, that's how we would be.
Even veterinarians have that power. That's where I played, I mean, that's where I had inspiration. But it's like, oh, so what? You killed the poodle? The poodle that we got for $50 at the pound?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's a little bit different. It's obviously apples and oranges.
Yeah.
But veterinarians anesthetize the patient, they prescribe drugs, they handle sharp instruments. You know, but you could make the argument on what, a $50 poodle from the pound? You know, where's the irreparable harm in that? But I'll tell you, people really love their $50 poodles from the pound.
Yeah, he calls it emotional pain.
Hey, just thinking about this.
Yeah.
My granddaughter works at a vet clinic and got some stories.
And especially since we went and processed a complaint from 2022.
Yes.
Even though we
Take a
moved so
while.
fast, trying to process, it could be a lengthy
Could be lengthy.
time frame.
If we need some post-meeting debriefing, I'm there for you.
It's an imaginary poodle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, we will meet, see where we go from here. Thank y'all. The September listening session is on September 20th. Just FYI, that's on the exam or the graduate exam. So we're gonna be talking or listening to people for, might end up with, hopefully we'll have some students. We have a bit of a conflict because the Clinical Society is also having an event that same day, roughly at the same time.
What time?
Ours is at 12:30 and theirs is at 2, so I didn't know. I don't know whether that's gonna impact or not. It should be okay, but you know.
It's 12:30 Eastern or
Eastern.
Just an hour.
Yeah, it should be, it should be okay, but anyway, just a lot. And, we'll schedule Janessa for other listening sessions, because our goal on that was to have one a quarter. If we count this one, we need to be thinking about whether we have one next quarter. It's going to be. So we may do or something else next quarter, so think about next month, so we can set that date. We deferred the job evaluations to the next meeting, so that will be at the October meeting. So we need the form, you don't have the last meeting. But anyway, fill it out, the board members send it to me, hopefully as soon as you can, but at least 2 weeks before the next board meeting, so I can correlate those together and get that. Do plan on making sure next time we do, we'll have to go to closed session, do the evaluations and not closed session, so it may take extended time because of that.
Did that get, no, I don't know if I have that form.
I don't know if I have it either.
I don't know where it is.
They were in the last month's stuff, so I'll send it out. to you.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay, that's all right.
I don't expect you may go into closed session for simple employee evaluations. I think that has to be done in open session.
We can, I don't, if we did last time, we went into closed session.
The personnel exception is for hiring and firing.
I think the last time we went to a closed session because we felt that may result in a disciplinary action.
Disciplinary
I
action.
think that was a justification of one to.
You can also ask simply if the employees will excuse themselves from the room to allow you to speak, but I think the camera, I don't think you can shut. I think you're still in open session.
Oh,
even
yeah,
if you
yeah.
had it. So the public can hear it.
Right, yeah. I would say maybe last time, it was like because of the potential whatever, you okayed us to go. to closed
Okay,
session. So,
I might rethink that, but that's okay.
Because if we don't, yeah, I mean, whichever, you guys
I think we followed the council's advice the last time, if we're going to close session.
I'll have to look at that.
Council, okay, for us,
I'll
so.
have to look at
You
that.
The council does.
okay? So, Bobby? We want to follow it,
I think at the time, it was, we were gonna just have it here,
yeah.
and it was determined that since that has the potential to lead into a disciplinary action. Like, potential, that's why we say it's better to go into closed session.
And employees requested it, you said, oh, yeah, let's.
Huh?
No, I don't.
Well, no one stopped you and no one's.
Races and all kinds of personal stuff.
Yeah,
I
right.
would prefer a closed
Yeah,
session.
so that's what, y'all can discuss that and let us know at the next meeting, because I don't want to have it public if it's, I don't have, if we're required to. If we're not, then.
That was a justification we had the last time.
Okay. Well, the two things are, do you want to talk about the people that you're talking about in front of them? That's one thing. The second thing would be, what about the rest of the world, the public?
Right.
You know, but if you're just, boards that decide to give someone a 5% instead of a 10% raise, or a 10% instead of 5% raise, they do all that in open session. It's not about hiring or firing.
This was reviewing the evaluation
Sure.
forms themselves and employees, and you said, yeah, because of that, we.
Okay.
have closed session.
All right then, I don't remember, but I do want you to do it right.
Yeah, you research it, us.
Okay.
Well, we won't.
So they would discuss compensation in an open session?
Yeah, I mean, someone would say,
would, yeah.
let's vote to hike his salary to an even $100,000. That's not enough.
I said though, like, I feel like my work is worth more than the 2% you want to give me. And I say that right out loud to the public, like,
Well,
Then go for it. Then go for it.
you know what I mean? I don't know.
That you, I've heard lots of those kinds of discussions.
Yeah.
Including very recently where person got a 41% pay raise out of it, in open session,
You're like, I'm for open session.
Alright.
Don't give him ideas.
And then I go to closed session, Mark, and maybe.
Our individual comments to you, they're gonna compile all of that.
It's one, so that we have one.
Okay.
You can have your individual to bring if you want, but then there would be one from the board for Mark.
Okay,
We would have Mark.
and Mark can look at
that
that.
day. Yeah.
So we're only doing Mark, correct?
Oh, well, technically we have to do both.
No, no, but our
And
input,
Mark completes the
Mark completely for Vanessa, because of the, so we would have for Vanessa, we would have all board members plus Mark, but for Mark, we just have board members.
Okay.
Okay, that makes sense?
Yes.
That's what we did. And last year was the first time, so we were kind of testing our way.
Just be prepared to temper your comments, good, bad, and in the middle, with the fact that it might be an open session. So, nothing wrong with that. I mean, someone may say, this person's the greatest employee ever, I vote to double their salary. Next person may say, I think they deserve a 1% cost of living. I mean, whatever.
Or somebody could say, no, they don't, they need, what
Yeah.
if they say they need a demotion?
That's not a real thing.
I'm not gonna flex on that, I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
I also don't think I would respond like that in an open session. For the record, I'd like never probably be.
Not gonna happen. Oh, okay. All right, thank y'all. Moving on to new business, and Mr. Brenneman, this was your.
Yes, I will occasionally read things of interest that I think would be helpful to the board, and Mr. Kelly, Mark with the C agreed. And this was a ProPublica research investigative report about two-part. One is just how people that call themselves life coaches are not regulated in any way. Anybody can call themselves a life coach and say, I'll charge you $200 an hour to be your life coach. I will coach your life, or an executive coach or an executive advisor. But then some of them were people that had their mental health licenses revoked, and then they turned around and called themselves a life coach. And strangely, one of the two people in this Utah case that made national news, where a woman was and her business partner were convicted or pleaded guilty or charged with child abuse. These were YouTubers who every, my parenting tip of the day, whack, smack the kid or whatever. Ended up being, this is national news. Well, the other individual that was a business partner, they were YouTubers and influencers and what have you. Their names are in here, was a former licensed therapist who became a quote life coach. So
Apparently highly sought after, have months of waiting list.
And how do people do that? I mean, as Hank knows, I differentiate the world between healthcare practitioners who are credentialed, licensed, like CSWs, LSWs, et cetera. And anybody else in the world who isn't one of those is just the bartender. Because you can pour out your troubles to a bartender over a pitcher of beers, but there's no record keeping, there's no standard of care, there's no confidentiality. If the cops say to the bartender, what did that person just tell you? There's no confidentiality like there is with therapy. So why someone would want to go to a life coach who is the legal equivalent of a bartender with no confidentiality, no standard of care, no record keeping, I don't know.
Now, my colleagues in Utah are, there's reaction to this is that there's a bill being proposed in the legislature to outlaw it.
Well, what
I don't know if they'll be successful, I haven't heard of it.
the way I think this board and other boards would view this is if you are educated and trained and experienced at the master's level in some human services field, or a therapy field or counseling, you are practicing without a license. If you are educated and trained at the master's level. Bachelor's people like French literature majors, no pun intended, no offense, they become the bartenders, but they're educated and trained at the bachelor's level. And it's not like they got an MSW and never could pass the test. That person providing a direct service would probably be practicing without a license. So just interesting that life coaches are not regulated and some people morph into life coaches by having their license as a LCSW or therapist revoked. And like the Energizer Bunny, they just keep going and going.
What I do in ethics classes, this often comes up. And I just say, well, if you've got a license under the board, that's gonna be where they're gonna complain and you can be dealt with as licensed. Because that's what you're doing.
And if you had that license and you lost it
Yeah.
for some reason,
Right,
and you still kept doing it, no matter what you called it,
right.
the board would still come after you.
Or maybe practice without a license.
Practicing with a license.
Yeah, so take your pick on the poisons.
I will say that I find this very interesting too. I'm glad you brought that up because I happened across a website not too long ago that was actually recruiting social workers to be life coaches. And I thought it was very interesting, especially the arguments they were making was showing the differences you can make in salary. And I mean, it kind of reminded me, again, this is apples and oranges, but it kind of reminded me of the pro-ana websites that promote anorexia, right? Like that's kind of what it reminded me of, that it felt very dirty. I guess is what I just felt icky even after reading it. But there are websites and folks, I mean, even social workers who have blogs, and I use the term social worker loosely, right? That have blogs that are saying, come do this. This is amazing. And I think some of this, and maybe folks from the NASW could fill me in on some of this, is that, a few years ago, we talked about coaching being a good way to help to motivate clients, but not life coaching. And I'm wondering if folks haven't, seen that word and was like, oh, I'll just be a life coach, who took off. And that's not saying everybody, because I do think there are legitimate companies out there that claim that they, facilitate, hooking you up with the life coach, that are actually actively recruiting people to do that. But it is very interesting to me. And so I wonder if that's not how some of the folks are getting involved. I mean, these companies have headhunters that are seeking people out. And maybe one of the ways they're doing it is going and looking at disciplinary logs of board. I mean, I'm not sure what they're doing, but it is really interesting.
One, very good comments, thank you. And one of the aspects is you can still be a licensed clinical social worker with a credential from the board and limit your practice to life coaching type activities. You know, you wouldn't take insurance anymore. You wouldn't be under the DSM-5 for diagnoses purposes. You could have any length session you wanted to that the client was going to pay for, and do it all private pay. But if you have a license, you still have the code of ethical conduct to adhere to. You can't steal from your life coach client. You can't have a romantic relationship with your life client patient. You can't have a dual relationship with them. You're still under the standards, but there are no standards if you call yourself a quote life coach or executive advisor. Go sleep with your patient or your client.
See, that's a practical example. One time was when, as a, question and answer about coaching is like, well, and that was back when people were going, well, I'm not licensed in another state, so I'll just call it coaching. So I said, well, how did you document that differently and did you bill for it? They couldn't answer that. I mean, again, cross state lines again, you can't just call it coaching. I mean, it's just lots of issues, and it's a segue to the next one. It's because what you just said, in essence, what the next one on here is because this was a CSW licensed in another state, thank God, who was a recruiter, but calling themselves a social worker and licensed and and recruiting for coaching. And this is my coaching practice. And it's like, whoa, like, anyway, that's where that came from.
Well, I even see articles in like Social Work Today and some of the others where they're talking about coaching, but specifically when they're talking about coaching and how to do it ethically, right? But I often think people forget those pieces and they see coaching and they see how much they can charge folks, and it's trendy, right? It's trendy. People are like, oh, I have a life coach. And so it's very attractive. I guess among a subset of the population that has the money to spend for life coaching. I don't know what that looks like. But I don't know, maybe that's something, maybe that's a CEU.
Yes, maybe we can do that. Yeah, just don't charge it. The highest fee I've seen so far. I'm sure there's higher ones. This was person, you do it online. It was $4.95 per minute.
Oh, gosh, it's.
On your credit card.
Isn't that like psychic trends?
That's what I was just thinking. What are we all, yeah, wow.
4 minutes. Whoa. This down's charging per minute. And I got all that. I still got like a clock and internet. Oh, anyway, I go, people are good. Maybe not take it. No,
yeah.
Anyway. Thank you all very much. We're trying to wrap the meeting up here. You realize that, don't you? So we get to announcements for our visitors and welcome, and got anything to tell us that we need to tell them. Brenda?
Check out NESW Kentucky Facebook page, we're pumping it all out there, a lot of voter registration information.
Yeah.
Obviously, the meeting, which is to discuss different pathways for licensure. Just coming right at the same time as Interstate Compact, there's gonna be some this, but I do appreciate the conversation. It really goes to show how critically important supervision is across the lines. You know, we're seeing it in people who are, teletherapy, cross state lines, this kind of lack of accountability with life coaching. And I do think this is a topic. I'm glad you brought this up, Mark, because it's all about how to get around it and how to language it so people think, hey, I can get counseling, but it's not going to show up on my record, my insurance, and all that good stuff. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be discussed, but we're busy trying to get around and try to, stop, Amendment 2 and all kinds of good stuff, and also looking at task force for accountability within state and federal insurance premiums and paybacks. That's a huge issue. So
Parity.
parity big time. And we've got our 2-day virtual conference at the end of the month, and then we're gonna do a regional, the big NESW conference that's usually in DC is gonna kind of do a horse and pony show, and every other year, every odd year, we'll be traveling. So this one's gonna be in Chicago, so we can highlight kind of regional things, which would be cool. So watch out. It's gonna be picking some people. So But thank you, yeah. NASW Kentucky Facebook page, or for those that need to renew their membership,
Yeah.
we'll be getting our
Our new membership.
newsletter and, yeah, so busy.
Lori, I don't know if you want to introduce your guest.
Oh, yes, this is, Vivi Rathke. She is a, one of those students we've been talking heavily about today.
We want
UK. She's doing her placement with me in school. And I also wanted to say that tomorrow is, Worldwide Suicide Prevention
Yes.
Day.
Thank you for doing
And I want to give a
Please.
shout out to all those people in schools right now that have to get this training done before September 15th. It's tomorrow. I have 8 sessions, or not tomorrow, but in the next 2 days, I have 8 sessions that I will be doing. So just, say a prayer for us.
And your conference coming up? School.
Yes, we have a school social work conference coming up, and Hank is giving us some time to talk about AI and ethics at it, so. He'll be back in town next week, so you need to meet up with him.
Yeah. We're
They're
gonna
gonna be
do,
scared after
the ethics class for relicensure piece, and then the next morning we'll do, more on the ethics issues around AI and social work. So looking forward to that. Should be interesting.
Should be, I don't know what people are gonna.
Well, hopefully they bring some, cases that we can discuss, because it's important to apply it to specifically, yes,
To guess, my name's Catherine Cadell, and I think I missed the
Yeah.
piece I was most interested in. Sorry for my late entrance,
That's okay.
but I am licensed in Kentucky and Ohio, so thank you for letting me sit in.
Thank you for coming. All right, hopefully you got something out of our.
I absolutely do, thank you.
A little bit longer than we usually go, but sometimes we have issues that we need to discuss, and we're really thanking you for taking the time to discuss some of the, we didn't get a lot of answers, but we've got things on the table that we need to discuss, and it's important for us to keep those issues out there. Because accountability and protecting the public, and that's what we're all about. So, thank you for your time. You don't get paid or thanks for this, so thank you. All right, any motion to adjourn? Oh, man.
Second?
All right, all in favor? Officially, that, you don't have to do that according to the parliamentary rules, but according to the state rules, we have that.
Yeah, so I.
Sure.
Like-
South Carolina?
Yeah,
South Carolina.
Ohio.
Leaving.
Ohio.
Right.
So I can count
Since I changed
part
car.
of it, of- But, I'll give it to you. Yeah.
All right. We'll see you then.
I think I might take our lunch and head out.
Next time I'll try to join you.
Now, make sure you check with the state when you're trying to.
Yeah, right, yeah. I'll check.
What? Well, actually, I interviewed one last Wednesday and they just asked me for references on Friday. And actually, like, here's the director role and the project role. And I did the project because I thought it would have my mobility for growth. And I probably don't have the experience with the director.
Glad to hear good news. Just signing.
Yeah.